I tend to faint. I mean, those remarks were just full of hostility. Because, I mean, you know, if I'd listened to those people, I would have gone out there on stage, I wouldn't have been able to hear anything, and I would have fainted. But the hostility was completely inappropriate, because in fact, those people liked me. I mean, that hostility was just some feeling that was, you know, left over from some previous experience. Because somehow in our social existence today, we're only allowed to express our feelings weirdly and indirectly. If you express them directly, everybody goes crazy.
It on for anything. First, I'd be worried I might get electrocuted. No, I don't trust technology. But I mean, the main thing, Wally, is that I think that kind of comfort just separates you from reality in a very direct way.
You mean?
I mean, if you don't have that electric blanket and your apartment is cold and you need to put on another blanket or go into the closet and pile up coats on top of the blanket you have, well, then you know it's cold. And that sets up a link of things. You have compassion for well, is the person next to you cold? Are there other people in the world who are cold? What a cold night. I like the cold. My God, I never realized. I don't want a blanket. It's fun being cold. I can snuggle up against you even more because it's cold. All sorts of things occur to you. Turn on that electric blanket and it's like taking a tranquilizer. It's like being lobotomized by watching television. I think you enter the dream world again. I mean, what does it do to us, Wally, living in an environment where something as massive as the seasons or winter or cold don't in any way affect us? I mean, we're animals after all. I mean, what does that mean? I think that means that instead of living under the sun and the moon and the sky and the stars, we're living in a fantasy world of our own making.
I mean, really, tell me, why do we require a trip to Mount Everest in order to be able to perceive one moment of reality? I mean, is Mount Everest more real than New York? I mean, isn't New York real? I mean, you see, I think if you could become fully aware of what existed in the cigar store next door to this restaurant, I think it would just blow your brains out. I mean, isn't there just as much reality to be perceived in the cigar store as there is on Mount Everest? I mean, what do you think? You see, I think that not only is there nothing more real about Mount Everest, I think there's nothing that different in a certain way. I mean, because reality is uniform in a way, so that if your perceptions are, if your own mechanism is operating correctly, it would become irrelevant to go to Mount Everest and sort of absurd, because of course, on some level, obviously it's very different from a cigar store on 7th Avenue. But
Well, I agree with you, Wally. But the problem is that people can't see the cigar store now. I mean, things don't affect people the way they used to. I mean, it may very well be that 10 years from now, people will pay $10,000 in cash to be castrated just in order to be affected by something.
Well, why do you think that is? I mean, why is that? I mean, is it just because people are lazy today, or they're bored? I mean, are we just like bored, spoiled children who've just been lying in the bathtub all day, just playing with their plastic duck, and now they're just thinking, well, what can I do?
Okay, yes. We are bored. We're all bored now. But has it ever occurred to you, Wally, that the process that creates this boredom that we see in the world now may very well be a self-perpetuating, unconscious form of brainwashing created by a world totalitarian government based on money, and that all of this is much more dangerous than one thinks, and it's not just a question of individual survival, Wally, but that somebody who's bored is asleep, and somebody who's asleep will not say no? See, I keep meeting these people. Just a few days ago, I met this man whom I greatly admire. He's a Swedish physicist, Gustav Bjornstrand, and he told me that he no longer watches television, he doesn't read newspapers, and he doesn't read magazines. He's completely cut them out of his life because he really does feel that we're living in some kind of Orwellian nightmare now, and that everything that you hear now contributes to turning you into a robot. And when I was at Findhorn, I met this extraordinary English tree expert who had devoted his life to saving trees. He just got back from Washington, lobbying to save the redwoods. He's 84 years old. He always travels with a backpack because he never knows where he's going to be tomorrow. And when I met him at Findhorn, he said to me, "Where are you from?" And I said, "New York." He said, "Ah, New York, yes, that's a very interesting place. Do you know a lot of New Yorkers who keep talking about the fact that they want to leave but never do?" And I said, "Oh, yes." And he said, "Why do you think they don't leave?" I gave him different banal theories. He said, "Oh, I don't think it's that way at all." He said, "I think that New York is the new model for the new concentration camp, where the camp has been built by the inmates themselves, and the inmates are the guards, and they have this pride in this thing they've built. They've built their own prison, and so they exist in a state of schizophrenia, where they are both guards and prisoners, and as a result, they no longer have, having been lobotomized, the capacity to leave the prison they've made, or to even see it as a prison." And then he went into his pocket and he took out a seed for a tree, and he said, "This is a pine tree." He put it in my hand and he said, "Escape before it's too late."
I mean, really, tell me, why do we require a trip to Mount Everest in order to be able to perceive one moment of reality? I mean, is Mount Everest more real than New York? I mean, isn't New York real? I mean, you see, I think if you could become fully aware of what existed in the cigar store next door to this restaurant, I think it would just blow your brains out. I mean, isn't there just as much reality to be perceived in the cigar store as there is on Mount Everest? I mean, what do you think? You see, I think that not only is there nothing more real about Mount Everest, I think there's nothing that different in a certain way. I mean, because reality is uniform in a way, so that if your perceptions are, if your own mechanism is operating correctly, it would become irrelevant to go to Mount Everest and sort of absurd because, of course, on some level, obviously, it's very different from a cigar store on 7th Avenue.
Well, I agree with you, Wally. But the problem is that people can't see the cigar store now. Things don't affect people the way they used to. It may very well be that 10 years from now, people will pay $10,000 in cash to be castrated just in order to be affected by something.
Well, why do you think that is? Why is that? Is it just because people are lazy today or they're bored? Are we just like bored, spoiled children who've just been lying in the bathtub all day, just playing with their plastic duck, and now they're just thinking, well, what can I do?
Okay, yes. We're bored. We're all bored now. But has it ever occurred to you, Wally, that the process that creates this boredom that we see in the world now may very well be a self-perpetuating, unconscious form of brainwashing created by a world totalitarian government based on money, and that all of this is much more dangerous than one thinks? And it's not just a question of individual survival, Wally, but that somebody who's bored is asleep, and somebody who's asleep will not say no?
Now, this vision of a universe arranged in harmonies of sounds and relations is no new discovery. Today, physicists are simply proving that what we call an object, an atom, a molecule, a particle, is only an approximation, a metaphor. At the subatomic level, it dissolves into a series of interconnections, like chords of music. It's beautiful.
Yeah, but there are boundaries, aren't there? Between you and me, for instance. We are two separate bodies, aren't we? That's not an illusion.
At the subatomic level, there is a continual exchange of matter and energy between my hand and this wood, between the wood and the air, and even between you and me. A real exchange of photons and electrons. Ultimately, whether we like it or not, we're all part of one inseparable web of relationships.
brain receives billions of signals every minute, and out of them we select a small portion and make a picture which we project outside and consider reality. That's our reality tunnel. That's our reality tunnel. A mosquito comes in the window. A mosquito will perceive an entirely different reality tunnel than a dog. A dog will perceive a different reality tunnel than a human being. Everybody does it differently. That's why no two people ever perceive the same interlude of time. If you set a watch and then stop it and ask them how long it was, they'll guess anything from 15 seconds to 4 minutes. If you ask them what color something is, some will say green and some will say blue. And this is why the first problem in learning Zen Buddhism is generally to identify the great master who makes the grass green.
Who is the master who makes the grass green?
Who is the master who makes... Well, I happen to be the CEO of the Committee for Surrealist Investigation of Claims of the Normal, and we actually are offering $10,000 to anybody who can produce anything that's totally normal in all respects, or even average. And then the normalists all claim that they got something that they can demonstrate. They call it the normal. They never can produce it. It's a mathematical abstraction. You try to find a normal dog, a normal human being, a normal Irishman, a normal Portuguese, a normal American. You can't find them. There is no such thing. But everything turns out to be uniquely itself and uniquely perverted from the norm.
Who is the master who makes the grass green?
Well, it has to do with language, as Nietzsche pointed out. It gets tiresome to say this leaf, that leaf, the next leaf, leaf number 4, leaf number 5, so we say leaves. And then sooner or later some asshole like Plato comes along and says that leaves really exist. And they don't realize we created them. So the reality isn't haunted by the abnormal or the paranormal. The normal has been invented by a process of self-hypnosis, of creative imagination.
Who is the master who makes the grass green?
The master who makes the grass green. That's our reality tunnel. Oh yeah, every reality tunnel is reinforced by a particular vocabulary. In Northern Ireland, there's a city that's called Derry by the Catholics and Londonderry by the Protestants. You say Derry in one part of town and the Protestants will shoot you. You say Londonderry in the other part of town, the Catholics will shoot you. And that's only one illustration. You go around the world, you find a million illustrations like that. People are entirely hypnotized by the words they use, and they want everybody else to use the same words too. The world is full of people who are killing one another over who has the right reality tunnel. As Noble Drew Ali said, if you let other people define reality for you, you are living in a world that is called hell. It's when you start creating your own reality that you can create a heaven.
Who is the master who makes the grass green? Who is the master who makes the grass green?
Who is the master who makes the grass green? If you're Van Gogh, you live in a world with cats that look like this. If you're not Van Gogh, your cat shouldn't look like this. The sad man lives in a sad world. The happy man lives in a happy world. The angry person lives in an angry world. At the end of the valley of decision, there is always choice. Reality is what you can get away with. If you can't get away with it, it ain't real.
Hello? Excuse me, do you rule the universe? I try not to. Are you wet?
Wet? Well, doesn't it look as if we're wet?
That's how it looks to me, but how you feel about it might be a different matter. If you find warmth makes you feel dry, you'd better come in.
Sure.
Oh, that's
fine.
fine.
Thank you.
Very kind. Just through...
What, ma'am, what's your name?
I don't know. Why, do you think I ought to have one? It seems odd to give a bundle of vague sensory perceptions a name.
Listen, we must ask you some questions.
All right. You can sing to my cat if you like.
Would he like that?
You'd better ask him that.
How long have you been ruling the universe?
Ah, this is a question about the past, is it?
Yes.
How can I tell that the past isn't a fiction designed to account for the discrepancy between my immediate physical sensations and my state of mind?
Do you answer all questions like this?
I say what it occurs to me to say when I think I hear people say things. More I cannot say.
Oh, that clears it up. He's a weirdo.
No, listen. People come to you, yes?
I think so.
And they ask you to take decisions about wars, about economies, about people, about everything going on out there in the universe.
I only decide about my universe. My universe is what happens to my eyes and ears. Anything else is surmise and hearsay. For all I know, these people may not exist. You may not exist. I say what it occurs to me to say.
But don't you see? What you decide affects the fate of millions of people.
I don't know them. I've never met them. They only exist in words I think I hear. The men who come to me say, so-and-so wants to declare what we call a war. These are the facts. What do you think? And I say. But it's folly to say you know what is happening to other people. Only they know, if they exist.
Do you think they